Bruh, 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 bruh. You ever just see a movie and you're just, bruh. You are not my mother. Unless, of course, my mother is in fact watching this, then I love you and I didn't mean that. But there is a new horror movie out called You Are Not My Mother that I just watched that I'm going to be talking about. And holy smokes! Okay, so before I get into talking about this movie, I'm just gonna say, I don't know if I've ever felt like this during a review. There were times in this movie where I was just like, it's not doing it for me. This movie's a mess. It's a 2. And then there were times where I'm like, it's a 7. It's a 7. And then there were times where I'm just like, it's a 5. And you know, one thing I will say as well before really getting into this video is that when I was watching this movie, so I mean, I announced in my last review master that I was going to be doing a review on this, that I was going to be seeing it in the theater, and you know, have you guys ever done one of those reviews to the fellow critics who are watching this video? Have you ever done that? Have you ever had that thing happen where you're planning to do a review and then you watch the movie and you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna review this. I don't know if it's gonna happen. I had that so much, but just as much was like, I need to do this review. And the latter of the two, yeah, I got shit to talk about. So You Are Not My Mother is about a young girl named Cher and her mother Angela. The movie starts off with Angela not that engaged with her daughter. It's a very weak opening in my opinion. Starts off with this girl Cher. She's like, "Hey mom, gotta go to school. I'm late." The mother's in bed. She's like, "Yeah, blah blah blah. I'll take you to school." They go to school. The mother and the daughter have a really uncomfortable car ride. And then when the daughter gets out of school, finds her mother's car abandoned, car open, mama gone. And then when she gets home, her family is there, her uncle, her grandma that she lives with. They're like, "Hey, where's your mom?" Mom's gone missing. Shows up a couple days later, is completely whacked out. So, with all the different feelings that I'm feeling about this movie, I'm just gonna get right into them. For the first act or so of this movie, it really didn't do much for me, which is really interesting because I really want to touch up upon this, is that everything that didn't quite work for me, it wasn't really bad. It was just like, well, it's not engaging to me, but it is a still well-made film. These characters aren't doing much for me, but goddamn the performances. It was very polarizing in that aspect to me, towards that first act. But here's where the film really takes off for me, is that once, so again, this is a horror film centered on, you know, this mother goes missing, and when she comes back, people start speculating that it may not really be the mother. Something else is underneath that. And I love those type of movies. For example, Goodnight Mommy, where the mother is in the hospital, she comes back to her twin boys, and they start thinking that that's not their mother. It's something along those lines, and I love those movies because they can go so many different directions, and a lot of times they're indie films, which are a lot better than high-budget horror films. And I will say this very quickly, which will excite a lot of you, which excited me. This movie does horror better, in fact best, that I have seen in a very, very long time. This is one of the horror movies in a long while that genuinely scared me. And I tell you, man, the horror in this film is done well, along with the performances and the build-up that, although wasn't quite up my alley in the first act, I could still respect it for what it is. So, yes, it's a very polarizing movie for me. There were times where I was like, this is a genuinely good movie. And then there are times where I'm like, well, it's a mixed movie, but it's got some bad qualities, but the horror is solid. And so, yes, I needed to really talk about this, because in saying this, there's still that half of me along with this that's like, maybe this is just one of those movies that takes a second viewing. Again, going into the horror, it does things so creepy. There's so much creepy imagery, the performances, and how the horror is built up and where it goes to and what they choose to do with that horror is so unique and so original and so well acted and performed and crafted that although that I do have a lot of nitpicks with the beginning act, and as the movie of a whole, there are some characters that just don't fit right. There's this group of boys throughout the movie that's constantly bullying Cher, and it just doesn't work for me at all. The things that they bring up and the limits that they go to just don't work for me. Like, for example, there's this girl who's always bullying Cher. It's like the leader of the pack, and she says things like, "Oh, blah blah blah, your family's mental because of something that happens," and then she's like, your family ought to be, or your mother ought to be locked up in an asylum, like you're crazy, and it's like, spoiler, this chick tries to burn this chick alive, and it's like, there's things like that where I'm just like, you don't need to be in this movie. I mean, Cher's, for the, just for the sake of, the character Cher's backstory, I guess it's fine, but it was one of those things where I'm like, there's so much good to this movie, but yet there's so much shit where I'm just like, not only is it cliche, it's just stupid. Why? Why did you do that? As well as an ending that didn't really do it for me. How the ending plays out and how it's built up towards the last act, I think it's pretty solid, but once that is actually at play and it goes through the credits, it really just kind of undelivers to me. So what I'm getting at from this is that as a horror film, it is very good. It does a lot of things really well. And if you're going to get scared and if you want to see a solid, family dynamic with solid performances and an overall well-crafted film, you're getting this. You're getting this. But all the filler in between and the film in retrospect, it is a very clunky ride. So overall, guys, I think I'm going to have to give this a solid 5 out of 10 or so. Again, there are so many things I liked about this movie, and I literally messaged my boy Tyler 20 minutes before the movie, and I'm like, it's a 7! It's a 7! And then, as everything played out, and I remembered how I felt about the opening act, as well as everything in between the filler, I was like, you know what? There's bad, there's good, there's really good, and then there's the rest. It's a 5. It's a very mixed bag. But in saying that, as a horror film, it does things so much better than I've seen in a very long time. And again, all the things that I didn't quite agree with, I can still understand to a degree. So guys, that was my review on You Are Not My Mother. Regardless of whatever I give this score, even if I did give it a 2 or a 3 or a 7 or a 5, this film did get a limited release. It is in some theaters as well as my hometown. It has been in the theater here, so I'm thankful for that. But if you get the chance to see this in the theater and you're wondering is it a spooky film? Yes, it is a good, well sought out horror film for the most part. Just in saying that, it is nowhere near a perfect film. So yes, guys, if you want to support indie films and you are a big horror fan, this is definitely one of the better ones I've seen in a long time. So that is going to do it for my review of You Are Not My Mother. My next reviews will be Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as well as Ambulance, the new Michael Bay film, which I know it's a Michael Bay film, but we got Jake Gyllenhaal, and he's been really talking about this movie in some good light, so I'll give it a shot. But yes, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know of what you guys thought of You Are My Mother as well as the review if you guys did see the movie. I'm going to end it here, but I will see you guys later on during the week with these next two films, Sonic and Ambulance, on April 7th and April 8th. So, take care, guys. Have a good night, and thank you for watching.